Give me liberty or give me death. I was fooled my whole life. I thought that was a line that was uttered when they already had a noose around the neck of that American traitor, Nathan Hale, and that he stared defiantly in the face of the people that were about to execute him and open up that little trap door and neck doesn't feel so good. And I thought he looked at them as if he was spitting in their face and said, "Give me liberty or give me death." And they said, "Okay, fuck you, Nathan. You're going to die." But it wasn't. It was Patrick Henry. And if Patrick Henry had said that last night, it would have led to a certain financial death and devastating financial ruin because Liberty on a 17 game, I love when this kind of shit happens. Liberty on a 17-game winning streak. They were 5-0 this year. They were 25.5-point favorites in their game against Kennesaw State. I believe that's the way you pronounce it. Going way back, you had that's the only other time you would have had a reference to a word like Kennesaw. Is it a city somewhere? I would imagine so. But Kennesaw Mountain Landis, of course, who ruled baseball with an iron fist. That would be the only recollection I had of ever hearing about anything with Kennesaw that was associated with a position of power. These guys were in a very weak platform position last night. Kennesaw State, 25.5-point underdogs. What do they do? And you had to lay $4,545 to win 100 if you wanted to take liberty on the money line in this game. Who the fuck is doing that? We talk about that all the time. Bridge jumpers, and how insane it is to lay out that kind of capital to try and make a relatively small score like that. But nonetheless, it happened last night as Kennesaw State wins the game outright, easily covering the 25 and a hook and rewarding their backers on the money line with a plus 1550. So if they gave you liberty last night, they gave you death. A lot of good things happening. We were a day late and maybe $1 short with our long ceremony theory. We were talking about this on the show yesterday with Troy West, where you have a long ceremony, in this case, a championship ring ceremony. The banner's going up in the rafters there in Boston, and all of the chowderheads are screaming, they're salivating and thinking, hey, we can do it again. We can do it again. And meanwhile, usually the team's been out partying all off season. Hasn't really come together that well in training camp. Figures they're going to do it again easily, resting on their laurels. And they get clobbered on opening night by what was supposed to be a bloodthirsty New York Knicks team that had all kinds of things that they wanted to go ahead and establish early in the season. Number one of which is that they were going to be a pain in the ass for the Boston Celtics in their attempt to repeat and even get to the finals again in the Eastern Conference. Reconfigured Knicks team, working hard in the preseason. Celtics on the chicken circuit the entire time. And what happens after the long ceremony where they wheeled out the dead body of Hondo Havlicek and Red Auerbach and Bill Russell to inspire the crowd? They were inspired, and the Knicks lay an egg. And as we said yesterday, they were flatter than a Parisian runway model. But last night, we would have hit with the long ceremony theory. We were a day late. We'll get into that in just a sec. If you are betting these games, though, and there's a lot of action to bet on right now, it's just at a premium. Basketball fans, it is that time of the year again. The NBA is back. From opening tip-off to buzzer beaters, BetOnline has you covered with the best odds, the biggest promotions, and live in-game betting on all your favorite teams. This season, every game matters. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup breakdown, and live odds to bet on during the game itself. So you're really having a party all night long. And it's not just the NBA. BetOnline has odds on everything from football, MLB playoffs. The World Series is on tap, starts tomorrow night. We'll get into that a little bit. The NHL, which has a pretty good slate of games, including Rangers-Panthers at the Garden tonight, to political props, election less than 2 weeks away. Head to the website today to get in on all the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here. Well, we have a lot of action to get to. We're hoping to connect with Mike Jones, also get his opinion about the World Series. He's a big baseball guy and joins us usually every Thursday. Although as these things prop up, you're thinking, hey, maybe there's a problem. Not sure. But we have a lot to talk about here. The long ceremony theory. So the Miami Heat last night, and I love this guy. If anybody, he's on my all Elliott Ness team in terms of people that we talk about here broadcasting for a long time in South Florida, but around the country as well. On my all Elliott Ness team of untouchables. You couldn't call a sports talk show that I was hosting or involved in and rip certain people. Don Shula was one, untouchable. This was talking about Miami sports icons. And Pat Riley, who, of course, was in Los Angeles with the New York Knicks, played at Kentucky. I think even did a stint as a player with the San Diego Clippers. Or Rockets, they were then. Yeah, he's sort of a universal figure, but he would be on my list of untouchables. If somebody would call in and say, hey, you know what? Pat Riley is losing a step. He's losing some velocity on his fastball. I'm telling you, not in so many words, but it's the old derisive Mexican whistle, which is a nice way of saying "go fuck yourself." We mean that in the kindest and most gentle of ways. But yeah, we don't want anybody disparaging Pat Riley. I love the guy. And last night, the Heat are taking on the Orlando Magic, their season opener. It's at what is now known as the Kennesaw Center, which is this fabulous arena on the bayfront that the Heat erected many years ago after the original arena, which was paid for by the city and the taxpayers who could ill afford it at the time in a bankrupt city in a decrepit neighborhood over town in Miami. And all of these promises were made. And 3 years later, they were saying, we need a new building. That's the way of the world today in sports. But we have all the respect in the world for the Heat organization. In general, they've been a top-flight organization, and Riley's been there 30 years. So what do? Mickey Harrison, very generous and humble owner of the Miami Heat, an ideal guy as a sports owner. Filthy fucking rich, and stays out of the way, gets the right people in place, trusts them. Organization's been intact forever. They have 3 championships. Maybe you think that's a little light, considering that LeBron was counting like 7 before they finally said, turn his microphone off. We'll never do that. And a great organization. Riley has brought them a level of distinction that few organizations ever enjoy. Among the iconic sports figures, in my opinion, of all time. Great coach, was great as an executive, and continues to just blow you away. Every time you hear the guy speak, it's an inspiration. So anyway, they have this long ceremony at the Miami Heat game last night at the Kennesaw Center to dedicate the court, which is now somewhat of a common thing. It's happening in other places. We're seeing courts dedicated to people that are worthy of that consideration associated with certain organizations. So they make it the Pat Riley Court at the Kennesaw Center, which they probably also attached like several other sponsors to it, but too lengthy to name. And this ceremony took a long time, as well it should, but it was a halftime of a game that the Heat were very much in. I believe they were stuck 58-54 to the Orlando Magic, a team that's on the come, and it's probably a club that you should watch very carefully if you're a degenerate gambler and you're betting this year. The Orlando Magic have made a steady ascent with these young players, and Banchero last night was outrageously strong in this game and dominated throughout the second half of the game. When the Magic pulled ahead, we're leading by like almost 30 points at one point, and eventually the game ended at 19, while the Magic were getting 2 points going to the post in this one. And what happened? The Heat came out dead after this fucking ceremony. It's inevitable. So where we were dead wrong, we just had to flip it and figure, okay, the team that's at home, that's got this great honor going, they're sending banners to the ceiling, and they're giving fans free food and drinks, whatever they could to accommodate an absolute frenzied crowd that was delighting in the 30 years of euphoria they've experienced with Pat Riley at the helm of the club, either as coach or executive president and essentially in charge of player personnel. And they come out, they lay an egg. They get beat 33-11. No, they get beat 38-18 in that quarter, outscored by 20 points, the Miami Heat, and that was it. That was essentially the ball game. Banchero had 33-11 in the contest, and he was great. And the other question, we were doing an interview. It's interesting how this goes. So we were doing an interview with a guy who I think is as plugged into basketball and the Heat as anybody that we know of. There are maybe 2 guys in the category. He's one of them. Been following the team forever, knows every intimate detail about what's going on with the ball club, all the maneuvers, is always involved in debates about whether this scrub should get minutes or whatever. Really knows just about everything you could possibly want to know about the team. Followed them to the Bahamas for the preseason. So you think you're getting some inside information and insight. And he tells us 3 things yesterday on another show that we do about the game, because I asked him about, naturally, the point spread, which would be our concern. And he says, oh, yeah, they should cover. It was 1.5 at the time. Should cover that. The game's probably going to go under. It's going to be a defensive struggle. The Heat defense is vastly improved, he says, and the Orlando defense is top notch. And that Jimmy Butler, who was always a big question mark, and this will be something to watch throughout the course of the season if you're betting on Heat basketball. Jimmy Butler, is he into it or not? And it's a contract year for him. The Heat have been sort of dancing around. You get the feeling the club really doesn't want one of those deals that you see quite often now, especially with quarterbacks in the NFL, where you don't know if the club wants to give the guy the money because they really don't, because they're not sure about him. And with Jimmy Butler at this point in time, as great as he's been in some clutch moments for the Miami Heat and bringing him to a couple of NBA Finals opportunities, he's doing a disappearing act the last couple of years. It really just almost doesn't even look like a reasonable facsimile of himself. So we were told by this gentleman, Ethan Scoop-Skolnick, who has a site called 5 Reasons Sports, which is excellent. If you're a fan of South Florida sports or you're interested in this area of the country, want to get some insight, tune this thing in. They have and a primary focus on the Miami Heat. They get into every single angle or aspect that you could want. And he tells us, oh, yeah, I've never seen Jimmy more motivated. The game's going to go under, and the Heat will probably cover the 2 points. So that shows you all the wisdom in the world. It means nothing, my friends, sometimes, because all 3 things were as if you were getting a bad call from Angel Hernandez and going to have to trot back to the bench and just temper the expletives that you were blowing his way so you didn't also get thrown out of the game. So, yeah, that was it last night. The long ceremony does in the Miami Heat. They come out of there flat, as we said, as a Parisian runway model, and boom, your Orlando Magic stick it to them, and all of the Heat bettors that were following our insight that we got from the ultimate Heat insider, he couldn't have been any more dead wrong, and we'll see where it goes from here. Now, in the NBA, it's only one game. I don't know that you can make definitive conclusions and judgments about what we're seeing in the first couple of games of the season, but we get another go-round tonight and sort of easing our way into getting into some NBA selections. World Series is kind of interesting, and we're sorry we weren't able to connect up with Mike Jones. He might have had a little trouble punching in on the website, but nonetheless, we'll get his insight and try and relay it to you tomorrow about the World Series, which what does it boil down to? You have the Dodgers have home field advantage. If the series goes 6 or 7 games, those games are going to be played in Los Angeles. They open up with 2 at home. They do, I think, face a real uphill climb. I mean, is this so obvious that you have to resort to any kind of statistical analysis? You have Flaherty, who's been just lit up in the postseason in a couple of his starts, and he hasn't gone very deep into those ball games. Going against Garrett Cole, the $300 million man, who comes to the mound with attitude and some good stuff. And while he has been a little vulnerable in the postseason, at least he's been sort of doing enough to make you think, holy Denny McClain. This guy was brilliant in the regular season. His was shortened, of course, because he was coming back off an injury and only essentially pitched half the season. But it gave you the indication that, okay, we can count on this guy to be an ace, especially against another team in a World Series situation that is staggering around to figure out, hey, is Clayton okay? Can he give us a couple of innings? I mean, and the only pitching factor that may be favorable for the Dodgers, their bullpen has been able to hold off the opposition, especially in the Mets series, and actually look pretty sharp. But the Fernando Valenzuela factor, and I don't know if people are always believers in the occult. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but is there not an omen there? A classic L.A. Dodger figure. I was witness to Fernando Mania. I was there in 1981 when it all got started, and it's only been done a few times in sports, and usually for a much more brief period of time. It doesn't extend over the course of a couple of seasons, as Fernando Mania did. Not to the extent it did in his rookie year there in 1981, when he wins his first 8 starts and then does all these other things that you would never expect a chubby Mexican kid to be able to do while playing professional baseball, supposedly at 16. Although I think they used that same birth certificate to clear Danny Almonte in that Little League World Series when he was pitching for Staten Island and he had like a ZZ Top beard. And you're thinking, I want to see some birth certificates on this guy. But the Valenzuela thing, I do think it has some impact on the series. I'm going to say yes to that. And I'm going to factor that in as a favorable intangible. It certainly is about as intangible as it gets. an intangible in favor of the LA Dodgers here. The sentimental value and the vibe and the karma that comes from the passing of Fernando Valenzuela. Now, maybe you're not buying into that. You're saying, you know what, DeForrest, that is the biggest crock of shit that you've ever tried to pull off on us on this show. Tread as you may and proceed as you may. Now, if you're looking at other factors, starting pitching, the Dodgers have none. They have Flaherty, who's getting blown up in a couple of his starts in the postseason, and Yamamoto, who comes with question marks, does he not? As he was okay when he came back in the regular season, hasn't been overwhelmingly distinctive in the postseason so far, although he's gotten through it. So, and with the Dodgers, with the Yankees, rather, you still have like three somewhat legitimate guys starting ball games for him. So, including Cole, which I think gives him a strong edge over Flaherty in game number one. We'll see. I mean, the soundest and most profound of logic almost always goes up in smoke, as witnessed by the Kennesaw State outright moneyline victory over previously unbeaten and 17-game winning streak riding Liberty in that football game last night. But yeah, I mean, can the Dodgers overwhelm the Yankees with offense? I don't know. Soto's been hot. And we've seen Stanton, and we're pretty familiar with Giancarlo Stanton from his days with the Marlins here in South Florida. Normally, what do you do with Stanton? Anything, any breaking ball, any slop on the outside corner, and this guy is all out of sorts there. All of a sudden, he turns into a human Gumby, and he can't get a bat on the ball. You would think you would just be feeding him a steady diet of that. But because he's putting so much pressure on opposing pitchers with his zone that he's in, and he tends to stay in these for decent periods of time. A lot of people feel like Stanton is a fragile component of any team that he's on because he could take one step out of the batter's box and break an ankle. I mean, he's been that fragile in terms of injuries over the years. But when he's zeroed in like he has been, and I'm not sure what this week off is going to do to the intensity with which he's making things happen. Wow, I mean, that gives him, I think, a comparable lineup to what we're seeing with the LA Dodgers. Ohtani, with all due respect to Ohtani, notwithstanding Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman. Freddie Freeman's hobbling. So pretty even series, to look at on the surface. The Fernando factor, I think, is somewhat favorable to the Dodgers, but and I'll be rooting for him because we've mentioned a few times on the show that we have a buddy who has a ticket that he gets 90,000 for 100 if the Dodgers win the World Series, having parlayed that to previous champions in college basketball with UConn and NBA with the Boston Celtics, who, if you looked at one game, looked like they were going to do it again. And then he had the Florida Panthers winning the Stanley Cup, which they held on by an eyelash there in Game 7 against Edmonton, and ended up rewarding him with a ticket that now has him in a position to win 90 grand. So we'll be rooting for the Dodgers. I did grow up as a Yankee fan. I covered the Dodgers for many years when I was working in newspapers in California. Kind of split emotionally. Whoever wins, I'll congratulate. But I'm thinking the Yankees are in there as a slight underdog with a shot against this LA Dodger team. So we will see. We'll no doubt have some more analysis on that, not just tomorrow, but through the series as well. All right, games tonight. We have a couple of things working here tonight, not the least of which is my alma mater. It's funny, too, when you do get Stanton out of sorts. My God, I mean, he looks like a crippled old lady up there trying to hit those breaking balls, and yet they're feeding him meatballs as if they came off the tables of the Las Vegas edition of Cafe or Rao's that's out there now at Caesar's Palace. Did that close down? I don't know. Big meatballs, though. You get the picture. And that's the way he's seeing these pitches. So X factor in a series. Can Stanton remain hot? Judge, I'm thinking, is going to wake up also when we get there. All right, Syracuse. I attended Syracuse University. I got there right after their run of excellence and this legacy running backs that were just extraordinary. Began with Ernie Davis. Then you had the great Jim Brown. You had Jim Nance, who was outstanding as an AFL player. Jim Nance, not often thought of in that run of backs that Syracuse featured. Floyd Little, of course, just a tremendous running back. And it ended in 1968 with Larry Zonka. And I think in 1969, Ben Schwartzweiler was the coach. And I was there, and I was thinking, oh yeah, Syracuse, don't they have a pretty good football team? And prior to that, they did. But Schwartzweiler had not realized that the forward pass had been legalized several years prior, and he continued to try to pound the ball with guys that were vastly inferior to any of the backs that he had just had in the past 20 or so years. And the program fell off the map there. Now, they've had Rise for Hope a couple of times. You had McPherson was there. He brought them up to not championship quite levels, but where they became respectable, and you thought they were in there with a shot in certain games where it looked like in the past they might have been overwhelmed. And then you had Paul Free Pasqualoni, as we called him, Paul Pasqualoni, who did bring some distinction to the program. You've had a couple of other periods of time, but right now you got this kid throwing a football for him, transferred from Ohio State, who has put their passing game on the map. I mean, Schwartzweiler's going to be rolling over in his fucking grave as he sees the way that the Syracuse Orange are taking advantage of the forward pass. They're getting 5.5 points tonight from Pittsburgh. This is, or has been in the past, a fairly bitter rivalry. I'm not sure that it's as applicable as it used to be with the teams now in the ACC. At one time, they were competing as independents, and it was one of those things where they hated Penn State. And they hated each other. Penn State hated them. And when those teams were battling each other, there was an intensity of the game that some outright rivalries sometimes outweigh the point spread. Where you have, like, say, Alabama and Auburn, and Auburn's getting a ton of points. But because it's their arch rival and they want to prove that, you ain't shit, they go out there and they give it everything that they have. Managed to very favorably for those taking the points, cover the spread. I don't have any sentimental investment in this one. I naturally would be inclined to want to see Syracuse win the game. They're getting 5.5 points. I think they're in there with a shot. So this may be the kiss of death for those that are backing the Syracuse Orange, but I think they have a chance to cover that point spread against Pittsburgh, if not win the game outright. Their loss is an ugly one, Syracuse, at 5-1, and that was to Stanford, a team that absolutely stinks. And they lost to Stanford at home, I believe, and that was in week number 3 of the season. So since then, they bounced back. They've acquitted themselves pretty well. They did go on the road and beat UNLV, who was ranked at the time. They snuffed that out right away, and all of that euphoria that was going on in Las Vegas turned into another night of just sleeping in the parking lot in your car at the Rio. Waiting for the breakfast special to begin so you can get a couple of pancakes for $1.99 and hope you have enough gas money to get home. Could be the ruination. We will see. But Syracuse, I'm going to go ahead, back the alma mater tonight, getting 5.5 and kick back and enjoy the game, and probably need some kind of pain reliever by halftime. Another game tonight. You have the pros going tonight. Vikings and the Rams. Many people are all over the Vikings in this one, thinking the Rams are not very good. And that could well be true. The Vikings are only laying 3 points. They were just in that Thriller in Manila type of finish. Down goes Frazier. That wasn't that fight. That was Foreman. But nonetheless, it was a hell of a finish there when they lost by a couple of points to Detroit, incurring their first loss of the season after writing a Cinderella story behind the arm of one Sam Darnold. So the Minnesota Vikings, many people feel, are just a very good team. That there's no special magic working out there. They managed to somehow resurrect the career of Sam Darnold, who was given up for dead by many clubs, and has looked razor sharp so far this year. So interesting matchup. Vikings laying 3 on the road against the Rams. I'm sure we have many people getting involved there, but your natural inclination would be to think Rams not very good. Vikings playing some excellent football. One narrow 2-point loss in a game they easily could have won against Detroit Lions team that many people feel has a shot to go ahead and win it all this year. So Vikings laying 3. That doesn't seem too prohibitive, and it's another home dog situation, which is a stat, holy Bill James, that hasn't been holding up very well. So you have all of that coming up, and that would be tonight, a big pro game. And of course, a college game of some distinction along with another. And remember to take everything into consideration as you're placing your wagers, because in a million years, who could have seen this? I hope there were no bridge jumpers in our audience that laid $4,550 essentially for the chance to win 100 with Liberty last night against Kennesaw State. That was just total and unadulterated ugliness. All right, World Series coming up on tap tomorrow. Can't wait for that. I'm really looking forward to it. Kind of broke my momentum a little bit the week off of watching playoff baseball, but I'm sure I'll get absorbed in this one. You couldn't ask for a more marquee matchup in terms of franchise histories. Dodgers and the Yankees doing battle for the 12th time. And whichever side of that you're on, we hope that all of your prop bets turn out to be successful. All right, we'll have the professor on tomorrow. He broke his slump there. He'd been on like an 0-7 streak. 0 for 7, and then came back with a nice winning weekend, including a big play on Georgia. So he'll join us tomorrow. A lot of college football action, some of the marquee games coming up. Notre Dame is taking on Navy. Navy's been one of those degenerate favorites this year, darlings against the point spread. Indiana and Washington. Indiana laying 6.5. They've been dominant and crushed Nebraska last week in a game that a lot of our guys happen to like the other side on. Alabama, Mizzou, I guess, is of interest. Texas A&M, LSU, tightly contested game amongst highly ranked teams. And we have one here, which getting 21 points with Florida State. Is that enough? Or do we have to once again factor in the Cristobal factor that Mario Cristobal could fuck up anything once you get to game day? I can't see them losing outright. 21 points in that kind of rivalry might be a lot, but Florida State just might be that bad. All right, good luck, everybody, with all your plays. Sorry we were unable to connect up with Mike Jones. For the people connected at nofilter.net and all of the people out there viewing the show, we appreciate you joining us every day, every weekday morning, and we look forward to bringing you the next edition of Bury Your Bookie.